Okay, good afternoon. I am John Scott. I'm the Customer Service Manager for the Jobfox Resume Writing Department, and I would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Our goal is to give you some key strategies that will help you master both the telephone and the dreaded Skype interview. We will talk about how to prepare for certain questions in these interviews and how to leave an impactful and positive impression on the interviewer. I have a few people on the call today that I would like to introduce. First is our keynote speaker, Sally Morrison. We feel very fortunate to have Sally on the call today. In addition to being one of our fantastic certified professional resume writers, she is also a certified job and career transition coach. She provides one-on-one career direction and job search strategy to seekers at all levels. Recently, Sally co-authored and published A Taste for Work, which is full of proven career advice, recipes, and direction for career advancement. We will also hear from job seeker Renee Hicks. Renee is a Jobfox member and resume client, and she is going to share the story of how her new resume helped her prepare for and ace her interview. And then last but not least, I also have with me some of your resume consultants. Now, these are the folks who critiqued and evaluated your resumes, so you may recognize some of their names. Those individuals are Andrew Manning, Patrick Taylor, Ian Richards, Jeremy Brooks, and Drew Sinclair. So now on to the agenda for today. First, Sally has a 20-minute presentation that will cover tips for gaining a competitive advantage in the telephone interview and how to prepare for that tricky Skype interview that many employers are now utilizing. She is also going to talk about how to prepare your environment for each interview and what you should do while you're being interviewed. Next, we will have Renee's story, and lastly, we will have a question and answer session. The way we would like to run the Q&A is for you to ask your questions using the chat box on the right side of your screen. We will be collecting your questions throughout the session and try to answer as many as possible during the Q&A. If your question does not get answered, we will provide you some alternative sources where you can ask us, and that will be on our Twitter and Facebook pages. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Sally to go ahead and get started on today's presentation.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you this afternoon. I love job search, and I know that's a strange thing to say, particularly because I'm not the one that's doing the searching. However, being a self-employed coach, I do a lot of searching for work, so I do understand how you feel when you're on the spot with interviewing. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about some different types of interviews that you might run into while you're going through your search. We're in a difficult economic time, so many companies are using different types of interview methods that will save them time and money. And it's also a way for them to screen candidates before they actually bring them into a facility for the meeting. The types of alternative interviews that I'm going to talk about today include telephone, which we're pretty familiar with, Skype, which is relatively new, and then really a newer type of interview that we're beginning to see in job search, and that's like a telepresence interview, which sounds kind of like science fiction, and actually it is a little bit like that. So we're going to talk about those three. As with traditional interviews, your goal in any time of your meeting with a prospective employer or network contact or anyone is to be articulate, credible, and professional. So there's really three things that you're trying to highlight and trying to accomplish. You want to build rapport with the interviewer and create a relationship that lasts beyond that first meeting, hopefully for a second or third interview. You want to show that you understand and can address the potential employer's concerns and priorities. And then you want to emphasize your ability to fit into the organization. So in a face-to-face interview, you have about 10 seconds to make a good first impression, but in an alternative interview, you only have about 3. So let's talk a little bit about the first one, telephone interviews. Telephone interviews. You can make a telephone interview work to your advantage. As with all interviews, the secret to success lies with advanced preparation. So let's take a minute to understand some of the negatives. It does put the job seeker in a little bit of a disadvantage because sometimes the call to actually do the interview just appears. You're, sitting at your desk doing job search, or you're out running an errand or whatever, your phone rings, and suddenly you realize that the resume that you sent off has yielded you a call from an HR person, and they might say, could I just have a few minutes of your time? Well, realize that that's going to be the start of an actual interview. You may be taken by surprise and not prepared for a discussion. So that is a bit of a disadvantage. I would say at that point it isn't inappropriate to say, I'd love to speak with you. Can we set up a definite appointment time? And then arrange for them to actually spend time with you on the phone. Another disadvantage is that since you can't see the interviewer and they can't see you, it's difficult to gauge the reaction to anything you say. I'm sitting at my desk in my office this afternoon, and there's several hundred people listening, and I can't see who's rolling their eyes and who's fully engaged, or who's totally disconnected and is eating lunch. Remember those commercials from a few years ago for a cell phone when someone was trying to have a delicate conversation on a cell phone and the call dropped and suddenly there's dead silence and they're telling them this, secret that they want them to know, and they don't know that the call dropped and they have no idea what's going on? Well, sometimes that can happen in a telephone interview. You can't gauge the reaction. Another disadvantage can be the language barrier. It can be a huge problem if English is not your first language, or if you're interviewing with a company in a foreign country, accents and slang and misunderstood statements could be a definite issue. So those are a couple of things that make you think twice about doing the telephone interview, but you can prepare for those. Now let's focus on the positives. Phone interviews save time, they save money, and they allow for a quick assessment on both ends. And if you're careful about it, you can take notes while you're going along through the interview. And that can be really, really helpful to you. So let's take a look at the next slide and talk about a couple of tips for a competitive edge. Some of us really are rebels, and when it comes to job search, we really tend to be obedient. All of a sudden, because we're on the line, we want to do everything that prospective employer says, and that may lead you to doing something that doesn't work out well. So as I said previously, don't take a call on the fly. However, try to keep a phone log with you near your phone at all times in your job search area so that when you do get a call by a hiring staff of a company, you're going to have that company's information at your fingertips. So your phone log can include things like when you applied for the job, what the description is, qualities that you have that make you a good fit for that position, and then the name and title of the person that you met. You really want to avoid saying things like, what is this job about, and can you remind me a little bit about your company? You want to keep a copy of your resume that you actually sent to that company near you so that you can clearly articulate very quickly that you had made a connection with them. The company wants to know that they are the most important thing to you, even though you know you're probably not the most important thing to them. Any other impression that you make is going to be at a bit of a disadvantage for you. You want to make sure that you have your phone charged at all times. I think that's really important because our phones, I find that the higher tech the phone gets, it seems like the less time the charge lasts. So you want to have that available to you. Have your resume in front of you so that you remember what you actually put on your resume or what your great resume writer had already put on your resume. Get really familiar with it because you have to realize that the prospective employer has it in front of them. Take good notes as you go along, And for some of us, we're so used to taking notes on our laptop, we're going to have to jot a few as we go along with an actual pencil. Write down the names of who you're talking to and make sure that you're spelling them correctly so that even with this phone interview, you can get back with them with a quick little note. Sharpen up your power statements. You're doing the same type of preparation for a phone interview as you are for a face-to-face interview, so make sure you have those prepared. And be ready to ask them some questions. You know, just like a face-to-face interview, don't feel like you have to fill the silence with more information, but have some appropriate questions ready if the opportunity presents itself. That, again, because you're not seeing somebody face-to-face and you can't gauge their reaction, that silence is going to hang on you a little bit more heavily. So you want to have some questions ready that you can throw back to them. Make sure that you prepare your environment. You know, as I said, I'm sitting in front of my desk at the moment, looking at my computer screen, and I'm using my cell phone, but I've taken my house phone and unplugged it just for this conference so that I'm not going to get any interruptions. I have the door closed, even though I'm the only one home, so if the doorbell rings, I'm not going to be interrupted and distracted with that. So preparing your environment is really important. And sometimes when you're on a big interview like this, it's really helpful to surround yourself with something that motivates you. A picture, you can't use music or anything, but you want to have something that maybe you can concentrate on. Now, this might sound strange, but you might sound better standing up than sitting down. And if you're smiling when you talk, it can make a difference in your voice. I have a client that took all of his phone interviews in the bathroom. It was quiet, he was able to lock the door, and he stood up and faced the mirror so he knew he was always smiling. Now, you might want to practice some interviewing on the phone with a friend or an accountability buddy so that you get comfortable talking and answering questions on the phone. Use an earpiece so that you can have your hands free, and that allows you to feel a little bit more comfortable like you're having a conversation. Few people are hired solely on a phone interview, but it's a great way to test the waters for both you and the prospective employer and to narrow the field down to becoming a semifinalist or maybe even a finalist. So you have to be as professional as you possibly can be on the phone. Now, the next type of interview, the dreaded Skype interview. Yes. Well, with increasing frequency, recruiters and corporations are using Skype because it's a very economical means of screening and interviewing job candidates. Skype has several benefits for the employer. It is no cost for them to download that Skype software, and it allows the interview to actually meet the potential candidate and get a better idea of how you present yourself, what your clothing might look like, your general appearance, your body language, and so forth. The job seeker, it allows you to show off some of your technology skills. It's more personal than a telephone interview. And you know what? It gives you a measure of safety because, again, you're sitting at home in front of the camera. You're not going somewhere that you know nothing about. Now, the disadvantages, really, nobody looks good on Skype. If you've ever done it, you can see you're not going to look great. If you remember, when Oprah had her TV show, she used to interview some of the stars on Skype, and they didn't look good either. So there's also some unpredictable technical issues and a little bit of a learning curve. For example, when you're speaking on Skype, you might have some jerky movements to the way you look, and sometimes you're talking and your mouth isn't moving at the same speed that you're talking. So it's not always the best. So let's take a look at some tips that will give you a little bit of an edge for your Skype interview. First of all, make sure you have the right equipment. You have to have a computer that has a web camera in it and a microphone. Now, many, many computers are being sold this way today, particularly laptops. And if you don't already have Skype downloaded on your computer, you have to go to the Skype website and do this. choose a professional username, as you do with your email. You don't want to have Maui Babe be your Skype sign-on name. So choose a professional one and make sure you have everything configured properly in terms of camera position and sound volume. The idea that you're going for with the camera is that you want a few buttons of your shirt to show and your entire head. So really you're going from mid-chest, up to your entire head. That's the only thing that's really going to be showing. So conduct a test beforehand with a friend or a family member or a colleague so that you know how you look. When you're looking at Skype, you not only see the person that you're talking to, but there's a little square that you see your own picture. And you have to be careful that the camera is positioned so that you're going to see that out of the corner of your eye, but at the same time you want to be focusing in on the person that you're interviewing with. Position the camera so that items in the background are neat and professional looking. Realize that they're meeting you in your home. They know that. But if you have a distracting picture or a sloppy bookshelf in the background, it can bring unwanted attention. It's kind of like when you're looking at houses for sale online, and I wonder didn't those people realize that making their bed might have been a good idea before they put their home up for sale? So it's really important that you don't have a distraction behind you. Lighting is a very critical issue, and you need to test that before your interview. Bright light that's coming from a nearby window or a poorly positioned lamp can lead to unnecessary glare. And if you have lights behind you rather than in front of you, that's going to backlight you so that you are kind of in the dark and you have this glow around you, and that's not what you're going for either. You want to illuminate your face so it doesn't have any shadows and make it as flattering as you can. So you want some light, but not a great big bright light so it causes glare. If you have a laptop, move the computer until you're sure it's in a place that has minimal glare and at the same time still providing good lighting. If you can't move your computer and you're in a room that has blinds or something like that, you might want to close the blinds. You might even want to hang a sheet or a towel or something over the window so that you've blocked out all that outside light and you're controlling it completely. You're going to need to experiment a little bit to make sure that you have the best lighting, and you're probably not going to get it perfect, but definitely you can make it as, optimal at least. Remember that with Skype, you have to dress for success. Now, you only have to dress for success from the waist up. You can wear your bunny slippers and your shorts if you want, but you have to look professional. Avoid wearing clothing that has distracting patterns, and also avoid wearing clothing that's going to clash with the room that you're sitting in. So, for example, right now, I'm sitting in front of a wall that's burgundy in color. So if I were wearing lime green and orange, that's going to give a very startling picture. So you want to opt for darker colors with a sleek, professional look, and avoid wearing all white because that tends to leach out the color from your skin, and that makes you more pale and almost gives you that kind of vampire kind of look. We're not going for the Twilight look here. So make sure that from the waist up, you look super professional. I have a friend who has done some broadcasting on television here in Chicago, and she said you'd be surprised how many of the professional anchor people are wearing shorts underneath that desk. You can do the same thing, but from the waist up, professional. Prior to interviewing, make sure that you've taken precautions to eliminate all the potential noise, just like you do with a telephone interview. And again, make sure that you practice, make eye contact with the camera. Don't focus on that little square of your picture, but focus on the person that's in there. You also want to make sure with Skype that you don't look down all the time. So your camera, you have to remember, is generally on top of the screen. So you want to be looking up, and that avoids that giant face look. But practice, because there's definitely a learning curve. Okay, the last interview we want to talk a little bit about today is the telepresence interview. Well, telepresence is really a visual solution, or it's real-time video conferencing. The word telepresence refers to a set of technologies. I think they were developed by Cisco. And it allows the person to feel as if they were present and to give the appearance of being present. So really what it is you're talking to somebody who's on a television monitor. We've seen this a lot on the news, Good Morning America, those types of shows. You see that often. And they're in a different place, and you probably have been called to actually go to the company, and you're going to be working with their technology. Now, it differs quite a bit from Skype because it has a higher resolution image and superior quality when it comes to sound. Now, it's growing, and it's becoming more common. And if you are aware of that type of interview, it kind of shows that you have paid attention to what's happening with technology. So you don't want to be low-tech and not available for that type of experience if it's requested of you. I would say if you're looking at doing this type of interview, you might want to consider some media training. And that doesn't mean you have to pay a media consultant to work with you, but you have to practice a little bit with your body language and your dress and take seriously how you're going to look on camera. You might consult with someone about, more for the ladies than for the men here, about your makeup so that you are giving the best possible look. We've probably all seen the guy on television who is bald and their head is so shiny that there's glare coming off of it. So there's things like that you want to avoid. So do a little research on preparing yourself for that type of media. Also, if you're dealing with a company that has gone to that length of having that type of interview, you want to follow it up by preparing some creative content that you can have available so that you are reinforcing your interview brand. If you have just a boring story about yourself and there's no career history that they can track down on you, obviously that's going to be a negative. So you need to go beyond the norm a little bit and make sure that you have a pretty good media presence yourself. And so a lot of that speaks to what's going to show up if you Google your name, and you can address that with a social media profile that we offer here from Jobfox, so that when you are preparing your online materials, like for LinkedIn, you're going to come up looking very professional. If someone searches Google, they want to find you as an outstanding potential candidate because some of these keywords are going to project you forward in that Google search. So that's something to think about in addition to that when you're preparing for something that's a little bit more high-tech. Now, my last couple of minutes here, let's take a moment to review a few items. In addition to these other 3 interviews, there's a lot of other types of interviewing tools or online tools that are available. And sometimes an employer will send you a link that will connect you with something like we're doing today. I think today we're using the WebEx tool, but there's Citrix and GoToMeeting, so there's a number of different things. These are common means of online interviewing and are very, very user-friendly. Prepare for your alternative interviews. Don't allow yourself to be thrown off guard. Stay current with technology and continue to learn about new things that are available, and focus on the advantages rather than the disadvantages. I'm happy to be a further help to you. In fact, if you would like to go to my website, which is on the screen right now, morecareers.com, you can download my free ebook, which is just a little bit of information on 5 essential steps to getting a job. And you can also follow me on Twitter, although that would just be MOR Careers. And I do post things there as well. So thank you for spending time with me this afternoon, and good luck with your search.
All right. Thank you, Sally. That was some great advice, some great recommendations. I think we all go into phone interviews or these Skype interviews with some trepidation, but I know I would feel a lot more comfortable if I took the time to prepare and develop a strategy using these tips that you mentioned. Personally, Skype is very foreign to me, so hopefully the seekers out there took some advice and took lots of notes. Some of the points that I thought were really impactful, first and foremost, just understanding what's on your resume. There are many times where you're in an interview process, and if you get asked a question and you're unfamiliar with what's on the document, you may be caught off guard. Also, preparing your environment. With these Skype interviews, you really need to have, a consistent professional image on the resume that hopefully is prepared professionally with your appearance. And then also just knowing that you really need to be in a comfortable environment when you're speaking with an employer. So thank you again. That was really helpful, and I know we have tons of questions that we'll address a little bit later. So now what we're going to do, we are going to hear from Renee Hicks, who again was a former Jobfox client. She's going to tell us how her new resume helped her land an interview with a potential employer. Renee was unavailable for today's presentation, but we do have a pre-recorded version of her comments and her remarks. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and play that now, and then after that we'll get into the question and answer session. So be sure to stay tuned, okay? All right, so I'll go ahead and play that now.
My background, I used to be a recruiter years ago, so I always felt like I had a real grip on how to design a resume, what was effective, etc. Well, I made a decision fairly recently to try something different. I made a decision to utilize Jobfox's resume service, wanted a new set of eyeballs, some real experienced professionals to take a look at what I had and maybe improve on what I had started with. The impact of making that decision really came through when a director actually called me from a large media company and said that he was responding to my online resume. And one of the first things he shared with me was that he was really impressed with how I presented myself through my resume. Our phone conversation turned into an actual phone interview. And I really do believe, based on how my resume was structured, how my accomplishments were highlighted from my last employer, I was really able to advance further through the interviewing process. And I know it's because my strengths were highlighted and I was prepared to interview based on how everything was structured through my new resume. I ended up taking another opportunity, but the same company, ironically enough, became a client of mine a few years later. And I really do believe the goodwill, the respect and credibility that was established from that really positive interviewing experience made for a great foundation in transitioning into a business relationship with that actual organization. So you never know where a good interview and being prepared will lead you to.
Okay, great. So I just want to thank Renee again for providing her time. We really appreciate that. So now we are ready to address some of the questions we've been collecting throughout the call. We'll go ahead and get Sally back on here. We also have some of our resume consultants in the room who will collect them. Again, if your question does not get answered, we are constantly monitoring our Twitter page. The account is under @Jobfox, so feel free to ask us questions there. You can also ask us on our Facebook page, or you can send us an email, give us a call, and we'll provide all that contact information at the end of the event. And then also stay tuned for a special offer that we'll have at the end. So let's go ahead and get started on the questions. Sally, if you can answer this first one.
Okay.
We heard it from a few different individuals, and this kind of goes back to the beginning when you were telling people how to be prepared and what sorts of questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to know, what are some specific, maybe generic examples of appropriate questions I should ask during a phone interview that will illustrate I am interested in the job?
Okay. Realize that oftentimes when you're doing a telephone interview, especially if it's the first one, you might be talking with an HR representative rather than the person that you would be reporting to. So your questions could be a little more general rather than specific to the job. So you might ask something like, how would you describe your company culture? What makes your company go ahead of the competitors? Or what can you tell me about the other people in the organization that I'd be working with? You can also ask something like, what is your company's policy on attending seminars, workshops, and other training opportunities? So what you're trying to do from that is get a little feel for where the company's going, how they position themselves, and if you can learn a little more about the culture, that's going to be to your advantage, as well as showing, I'm interested in doing some more training. What does the company offer in that regard? So those are some of the questions I would ask.
All right. The next question that we have, again, is for you, Sally. This one is kind of goes into the Skype process. If a hiring manager requests a Skype interview, but I don't have a webcam or I don't have a Skype account currently, is it appropriate to request a regular phone interview, and how to address that issue?
You know, you could ask for a different type of interview, but that is going to speak a little bit to your lack of trying new things or learning about new things. So, first of all, a Skype account is free, so there isn't any reason not to be able to have that available to you because there's no cost to you. Secondly, I think that there are so many people that have their own computer that you probably have someone in your friends or your family that would be able to offer that type of technology to you. So before I would turn it down, I would ask around and see if there is someone that could provide a computer like that for me or let me use their home, you know, for an hour or so to go ahead and do that. Barring that, then you would have to say, I don't have that technology available. Could we do a different type of interview? But I would really avoid that. I would try to take some measures to make that available.
All right. That was kind of my thoughts on it as well. The next question will be for our resume consultant, Patrick. This will go into a little bit about the resume service. Does Jobfox have a service available that will help me get more phone or Skype interviews and ultimately in-person interviews?
Hi, guys. Absolutely. Our clients receive, on average, about 2 to 3 times the responses from our resume service than those that craft their own documents. And when we measure these responses, it's not only just from simple callbacks and Skype interviews that we're talking about today, but also just general in-person interviews. And this is a full resume package that we offer. It's not only a rewritten resume, but also an e-resume for electronic use and a reusable cover letter. And the great part of our service is the individual attention you'll get from your professional writer. You'll have a direct line of communication with that writer, not only as they create your documents, but also 60 days after you receive them, which really allows you to go through, say, that first round of interviews and speak with that writer on what worked, what kind of questions arose as a result, and then you could come back with those changes. And we also offer a 60-day interview guarantee. We're so confident that if you haven't received an interview within the first 60 days after you received your documents, that we'll actually rewrite it again for free at no cost to you.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. The next question will be, again, for Sally. And this one kind of goes into the age issue, which I know we hear a lot about, and we got a ton of questions today. One of them was, I am worried a Skype interview will give away my age before the in-person interview. How do I address this overqualified or too old issue when I am speaking with a potential employer?
You know, that is always a sticky question. Unfortunately, none of us have found the true formula to stay young. We've seen evidence of what can happen to people if they do extensive plastic surgery. So you have to be careful with that. But obviously, if you're in a Skype interview, it is going to give a little bit of information about your age. But you can address that in the way you dress and the fact that you have taken some time to update your look a little bit. Glasses are a big giveaway for people. If you're still wearing, the Angela Lansbury glasses from Murder, She Wrote, the big giant frames in red, obviously you need to do a little updating. So you can't avoid the inevitable that eventually they're going to get an idea of how old you are. And you can't avoid that. So the way to combat it is to, first of all, stay as current as you can in age-appropriate dress and glasses and makeup and the whole 9 yards, as well as preparing yourself with some techniques for handling the questions. A lot of what people are worried about when it comes to age is, can you work with people that are younger than you are? Can you take marching orders from people that are much younger than you are? Are you technology savvy? And really, do you have the energy level that you need to have? Now, John and I have never met, so I don't know how old he is, and he doesn't know how old I am. But if I start throwing information out that's going to give away my age, then he's going to have an idea and start building a picture. If we do a Skype type of interview, I can work with that a little bit just by my appearance and the way my voice sounds. So if I sound like I'm tottering along or laying in my easy chair, that's going to give a different picture of me than if I sound like I have some energy. If you're applying for a certain level of position, they don't expect you to be 25 years old. They expect you to be a little bit older, but you have to have that energy that backs it up, along with the technology skills and the ability to be a team player with people, even if they're 25 years younger than you are. So face it, prepare for it, and work with it. That's the best advice that I can give you.
That's great. I mean, that's just what people need to hear, and I know in the end it just comes down to being the right fit for the position. So as long as you have that energy and you're portraying those skills that you mentioned, ideally it'll work out. The one question that I think everybody here, if they've been on a phone interview or an in-person interview that they receive, that's always tough to answer. I'm hoping that you can address this, Sally, is the question, tell me about yourself. That's something that I personally have trouble with answering, so I'm hoping that you can help us out and provide some tips on that.
Sure. When someone asks you that question or gives you that opportunity to make a statement, you really only have about 30 seconds to make that statement. If you talk longer than 30 seconds, they generally stop listening to you and start forming other questions they can ask you, or they just go off in another direction. So there's really 5 things you want to pack into that 30 seconds, and I recommend that you really sit down and write out the 30-second summary. That's really what it is. So the first step, or the first thing that you want to cover, are a few of your characteristics. I'm a creative, innovative career coach. So that's all I'm going to start with. And then the next piece would be a little bit about your experience. And also, it's not the place to say I have over 20 years of experience, because all of a sudden I've gone from being, maybe I'm in my 40s to being, maybe I'm in my 80s. So I have extensive experience providing career coaching and resume writing for job seekers at all levels. The third piece is a little bit about your educational background. You have a master's degree, or you have a bachelor's degree, or this is another place where you can bring up some current training that you have. The fourth piece is a little trickier, but if you are able to master this, you go a long way, because you're going to be able to say something unique about yourself here. I had a client, for example, who was a training and development specialist, and she would train executives. This little lady was about 5 feet tall and weighed 90 pounds, and her unique piece was, in my spare time, I train award-winning bull mastiffs. Those are those gigantic dogs, and she's award-winning. So she was able to tie her unique piece back into what she did for a living. And here, this was a number of years ago, and I still remember her. And then the fifth piece would be putting it all together. So what you're doing is you're tying in 5 important things they need to know about you. Your characteristics, a little bit about your experience, a line or two, a piece about your education, what's unique about you in relationship to your characteristics, and then tying it together with what you can do for them. That's really what they want to know, and you've got 30 seconds to say it.
All right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Sally. I think we're going to wrap things up now. We really appreciate all the great advice that you provided on today's call. Before we wrap up, if you would like help rewriting your resume, to have Sally or one of our other certified professional writers revamp and update your job search, we are offering a special package and discount for anyone that attended this workshop. It is our best discount, and it includes a full resume rewrite, a cover letter, and an e-version of your resume that is specifically formatted for submitting to online databases. As a bonus, with this package, we've included a free thank you note that can be used after the interview. And also, this package includes a relatively new feature, which is that 60-day guarantee that Patrick went over earlier. This states that if you do not get an interview within the first 60 days after your resume rewrite, we will go ahead and write the resume again for free. So to purchase this package, you can call into our resume line now, and that number, as you can see on the screen, is 877-456-2369. We'll go ahead and send out an email with an offer to that package a little later today, so look for that as well. And again, if you have any other questions, if you need help with anything, you can like our Facebook page, you can post on our Twitter, which is @Jobfox, and we are constantly monitoring that, and we'll get back to you very quickly. So I'd like to close by saying thank you for attending, and I hope the information we shared was helpful. I wish you well in your job search, and best wishes for your future careers. Look for additional topics in the upcoming weeks, and that concludes today's webinar.